We didn't go deep enough. He's shown us the ability to get over that hump. He's shown us the ability to put the ball where it needs to be. He's a good game manager. The guys are starting to come around to him, it seems like. Like, why are we going to start from scratch again when we're just kind of making hay here? And I think that when they look at that, they go, well, what do we need to do? We have Dalvin. We obviously have Diggs and Thielen. We have Rudolph. We have Herb. We got all those pieces. We're just not protecting him enough. We're not keeping him upright. The minute he gets hit, everything's scattered and he's kind of all over the place. And then the offensive line starts to kind of turn all over the place. I mean, do you look at this last game? Dude, Brian O'Neill gave up a sack. That has not happened yet. Like, these dudes were good. But the problem was they just kept laying it on him relentlessly. When you can't get up or catch a breath or stand up straight, like, that just changes the whole game. And that's why you look at that game plan and you're like, dude, that was definitely not what they were trying to do at the beginning of the game.
Well, where do you start then? Because this has been the topic of conversation going into the draft for the last few seasons, and every time they address it, it feels like whack-a-mole. Like, you get Brian O'Neill in the second round. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, but that was kind of the question mark at that time. Right. Is he going to pan out? Is he a converted tight end that's going to take another year? And that was great. It worked. And then this year it's, oh man, number 18. Get Garrett Bradbury, plug and play, expecting that much out of a center who struggled. I mean, he had a rough year, and I don't know if I can necessarily blame him. He was undersized in a scheme that's supposed to be to his strengths, but he's going against really good interior defensive linemen, so of course he's going to be exposed that way. So it feels like for every one that they fix, there's always another one that falls by the wayside. So I'm asking, like, what do you do? If you say they need two different offensive linemen that are not currently playing right now, and Mike Zimmer is talking about redshirting guys, so maybe Drew Samia is the answer, and we didn't see it because they decided to use the college route and redshirt him allegedly. Which positions do you fix first, if it's up to you, outside of left guard, because we all know that that's number one?
Well, that would be I mean, it has to be one of the guard spots. I think when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, Brian's great. Garrett obviously can't go anywhere. He's young. He's a first-round pick. We're gonna develop him, and I'm not giving up on him either. I don't think they should either. I think they need to be like, listen, dude, you need to, number one, beef the hell up. Like, dude, we're in the North, okay? We're not here to just play patty cake. Like, we're here to be big boys. So you need to gain some weight and get tough. But you need to put somebody next to him that's not afraid to kick a dude in the face. That is where people find confidence. It's not the guy himself, it's the guys around him that are like, dude, are you coming with us or what? Like, this train is leaving and you're either coming with us or you can fall by the wayside. That's when guys start getting on. You look at these teams, like, I'll give you the best example. New Orleans back in the day were a lot like this, right? Like, they had some good tackles. They had two phenomenal guards, Carl Nix and Jahari Evans. And then they had the old center, Jonathan Goodwin, in the middle. Johnny wasn't really good for much, but his brain was impressive. Like, immaculately amazing. And he could power block you like crazy. But you put two guards next to a center like that, dude, and watch how this transforms things. Because those two guys are going to give him the confidence. They're the ones that set the tempo for him. They're the ones that always help the center. The tackles don't help the center. The guards do. So you get two big dudes in there. Like you said, the Drew that they redshirted, he's a big boy. Put him in there. If he's tough as nails, that stuff starts to wear off. The problem is when you put Elfline, a failed center at guard, next to a center that's probably not ready to play in the NFL, next to a super old center, like, it's like, or a super guard, you're like, well, who's going to be the leader in the interior? Like, who's leading the core right now? Nobody is. You need to find one guy that's going to help Garrett step up, and not only that, could help the left tackle step up too.
So I guess I can't help but think, what is the cost and what is the value that they would get out of trying to improve the offensive line? Or what I mean by that is, what do you lose because of it, and how much is it actually worth? So when I'm looking at how they produced on offense this year, they end up being the 8th best offense in the NFL in scoring, which is pretty darn good. And with Kirk Cousins, he has the best year of his career across the board. Now, we know that there were some weaknesses, but also if you overpay for offensive linemen in free agency, sometimes that doesn't work out very well. In fact, oftentimes it doesn't work out really well. It worked out in Andrew Whitworth's case with Los Angeles, and maybe Roger Saffold's this year, but it's usually one per year works out, and the rest of them sort of end up being okay or disappointing or whatever else. So in a very tricky cap situation, which it's always going to be with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, Courtney, how do you solve the puzzle here of trying to improve that and figuring out how many more points you're going to score because of it versus filling the gaping holes in a lot of other positions, including in the secondary.
Well, as Mike Zimmer said yesterday, just when talking about this is a young man's game, that alludes to what's going to happen this offseason in cutting the fat away from the salary cap and trying to trim as much as you can to be able to give yourself flexibility that you just don't have right now as it stands on January 14th, projecting ahead 2 months to free agency. So that means you're taking these high cap hits from probably Xavier Rhodes, probably Everson Griffin's last season here, probably maybe Riley Reif. I don't know. People were arguing with me when I thought, hey, okay, maybe to me, there's bigger issues to solve than your left tackle spot right now within the interior, which is why
average.
It was fine. It wasn't great. It was average grits. Like, that's what I thought of Riley Reif this year. So, I mean, I was okay keeping him, but you have a lot of other players on defense who you can move on from or restructure or just try to get the money to be active in free agency and not try to get a tier, a second wave free agent guard like you did in Josh Klein, and you guaranteed him quite a bit of money for what he was worth. So if you're asking how do I fix it that way, that's probably where I would go first, because I don't think you wait to the draft and say, okay, number 25. If you're looking at an offensive lineman at 25 overall, you probably could get him in the second or third round. I would spend that pick, which I'm shocked I'm even saying this. I would spend that pick on a cornerback right now.
Yeah, no, I actually would too, because you don't have them. I mean, there's like no one who plays cornerback for this team right now.
And you can get a good corner versus, I would pick a corner over a guard that I might be rolling the dice on to be a plug and play starter day one at 25. I think that's totally rational. Don't you, Alex?
Yeah, I think so too. I think the one thing, I like the fact that Drew's been here a year too. I'm curious to know more about him. And I think that's the one thing that we're all waiting to see is, like, you've been in the system now for a year. Obviously things are going well at practice. Mike must like you, which means you're a tough, gritty dude. I mean, I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of question marks in terms of, like, who's coming back, what's going to happen. Like you said, Riley. Like, Riley's a really good point, because what do you do? Can you move on from a left tackle right now? Is Rashad Hill prepared to step into that role? And if not, like, then all of a sudden you're down more spots.
I don't think
so. But like, Rashad's such a conundrum to me because he's so strong and he's so long and he's so good. If he just really thought about what he was doing out there, that kid could be dangerous.
I just feel like he's always his ceiling is a backup. Don't you think?
He's a swing tackle. I like him in that position.
I do too, but you're right though. There's so many question marks. You could free up so much cap space, and that would make this so much. That paints a whole different picture moving forward.
Well, that's the biggest question, Alex. Is how do you go from good to great on the offensive line? And I'm sure that people would get upset if I called them a good offensive line, but I think that they were an average offensive line this year. They allowed the 6th fewest sacks this season, which was definitely schemed, but also, they had to work well within the scheme. And on the running game, they're one of the 5 or 6 best running teams in the entire NFL this year, helped by Dalvin Cook, who isn't helped by a good running back, but you have good run blockers up front. So going from terrible to average is not super hard. You sign a guy, you draft a guy, and then you're average. I think going from average to a great offensive line is extremely, extremely tough. And usually what it takes is finding, I don't know, David Bakhtiari or Jason Peters or whoever it might be, a superstar left tackle is the best way you can do it, because that position is just more valuable. But then you have to ask, well, all right, how is that going to happen? Where is that? Where are you getting that guy? And it's usually only the top of the first round of the draft. And that's where I feel sort of stuck, Alex, when we talk about improving the offensive line, because even though you'll get better by putting somebody else in there instead of Pat Elflein, how much better is a bit of a question to me when you faced so many great defensive ends in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that. Are you talking about the age? Like, you're talking about a young player versus a veteran player?
Well, I'm just talking about if you replace the left guard with someone, I don't know that the impact in total points over a season is massive. Or how you handle San Francisco this last weekend. I don't know if that's massive. I think a left tackle is the only position on the offensive line where that gain is super serious if you go from average to great at the position.
Bro, that's nonsense. That's absolutely
You're nonsense.
No. I'm telling you right now, that's nonsense. Look at Indianapolis right now.
I think you left guard bias here.
One guy changed that whole team. And I get that
And he was a
people are
high
like,
draft pick, though.
yeah, he was a high draft pick, but he was worth it. Like, he was one of the guys that panned out. And a lot of people don't realize, too, that Gooch had a lot to do with that O-line. But look at Costanzo, dude. He had been up and down for years. And now all of a sudden you reinsert one cog.
Yeah, I'm saying
Like this,
finding him is hard.
it is, but it isn't. Like, a lot of guys show you what they are. People refuse to believe it. And sometimes what you need is just a tough guy in there, a mauler, a guy that's like, hey, man, we're going to circle the wagons around our center, and we're all going to protect him. And if nobody's in on this, then you can leave. Like, guys that just step up, aren't afraid to say things. I think you need a real leader on that O-line. I think Brian is truly the guy that they look at because obviously he's one of the better players on the O-line. And not only that, the dude is consistent week in and week out. But if you paired him with somebody else on the other side, like just a tough, gritty dude that could come in, like have some fun, make these guys cheery. It always seems like they're so stressed. And I agree with you. I think that they had a good year. But the problem for me as a pro is the same things that showed up week one in the pass pro showed up in the playoffs.
Yes.
People expose you too much to stupid things. When you lean on your pass set in week one and we're over here like, yo, stop leaning. And then you lean again in the playoffs. Like, how many times? 3 or 4? Dude, that's unacceptable. You're a professional. You should hear it once and go, got it. Will not happen again. The whole year, stop setting on different levels. How many people had to go up there and be like, yo, you guys you don't look in unison. You look like you're all off. And it never changed. That is also a reflection of the O-line coach. Like, there should be people need to be accountable for this stuff. Elfine's one of them. The O-line coach is one. I don't think that more than we talk about that you can get rid of Riley because that position is extremely important. But I think if you replaced Elfine with somebody really good, somebody that fits this system, somebody that Kubiak wants to bring in, look to Gary to find who he wants. That could be really interesting.
I was just looking briefly at the offensive line, or
Who you got?
just tackles that are potentially available in free agency. So the best one right now is Jermaine Afadi from
so we're good on
Seattle.
tackles.
Yeah.
We're good.
So if that's your best one, because
you ain't getting a tackle.
He's 26. Because like Alex, like listen to the rest of this list. I mean, there's like Andrew Whitworth. He's like 40.
Yep.
Jason Peters is 38. This list
Not
says
happening.
Donald Penn.
Yep.
Your boy Anthony Costanzo, Marcus Gilbert, Mike Remmers could come back. He's a free agent. So
Third time's a charm.
like, and actually he'd be playing the position he was, meant to play and not being forced inside to play guard because of injury concerns. But Brian Balaga is probably the only one on this list that I would be like, oh, okay.
And he's always hurt.
So, I mean, I think that's why I say when I talk about Riley Reif, like, this is the least of your problems right now.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you draft somebody to potentially be able to move Brian O'Neill over because he's your left tackle. You don't think he's left tackle the future? Like, eventually?
I do, but I like what he's doing right now. And I have a big problem with moving people because I've seen how it goes really bad in people's minds. They're just like, dude, I can't do it. Never mind, I won't. But there are people that I know that are like, dude, I just couldn't handle the switch. Sometimes when something looks really good, people should just be like, let it go, man. Let's just stay there.
Mike Remmers is an example of that.
Let it blossom.
He could just be a guard. It'll be fine.
Nope.
I never understood where they got that idea from, but
no, it was not fine. Not even close to fine. Poor Mike Remmers. He used to just look at us in the locker room like, please don't talk to me.
Well,
please, I know how it's going. You know how it's going. Do we need to do this?
I have one question because the person we don't ever talk about here, I'm wondering if it's a good thing we don't talk about with Josh Klein.
He was okay. Yeah, it wasn't great, but he was okay. So, he was as expected, I think.
To me, that's also one that you don't necessarily mess with. That's not your top priority to mess with right now. Because
if something falls into your lap, I would. I mean, I wasn't overly impressed at all. Like, there were times where he was getting driven in the backfield where you're like, dude, you're a vet. You should sit down a little bit more. That should be like remedial. Like,
but that was him when they signed him. That was why he got cut. Is because he was getting picked up and put into Mariota's lap in Tennessee.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, when you're looking at this, though, you're like, man, this sounds like we have a lot of things we need to fix. What's the number one thing? Left guard. Mm-hmm. Fix your left guard, and you will have a way better O-line. Promise.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that you'll be better. The one thing that I think is with the offensive line, it is not just how good are you. It's how good you need to be for the team that you have of weapons and the quarterback that you have. So if you're Kansas City, and they have some good offensive linemen, there's no doubt about that. Mitchell Schwartz is amazing.
Fab.
But they don't need to have the best left guard in the league. They were in the AFC Championship last year with Cameron Irving, who is horrible. And it's true. And So, but here's Pat
But
Mahomes. It doesn't matter because Pat Mahomes can move around all over the place and make plays. And the same thing goes for Houston's offensive line. Not particularly great. And Deshaun Watson can make plays. You need to not just be pretty good and have a better left guard. You need to be great to have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. And this is where we're talking about through the lens of what if they keep him as a contract extension. I think at that point, you need to start drafting offensive linemen every year in the first round to get those guys, because your offensive line doesn't have to just be okay. It needs to be freaking phenomenal, because Cousins holds on to the ball and holds on to the ball and holds on to the ball and won't throw it whenever there's coverage. So it's in a way, it's almost like it's not the same as maybe some other team's offensive line. Your requirement is much, much higher, to the point where even in 2016, when Trent Williams and Brandon Schreff were both healthy and that offensive line was great, he was still getting pressured in the middle of the league because he invites that pressure by holding onto the ball.
Agreed, but I think that a lot of it is minimized by Dalvin. And I think that when they go away from that dude, his glaring issues are just glaring. They're like, wow, that is. And then the old line gets exposed. It's like when everything's rolling fine, it's like they're passing maybe 10, 15 times a game. Like when they were throwing 20 times a game or less, we were like, wow, these guys look unstoppable. The minute they had to go over 20, they got exposed. It was like, whoa, okay, maybe they're not that good. I mean,
definitely means you should pay the quarterback $30 million or more, right?
But maybe you should let the offensive coordinator just be like, hey, man, maybe we should just speed up these routes a little bit. Maybe we should just get some quick balls going. Maybe we should stop doing so many screens and maybe do some more missiles or some smokes or some other things. Stop. I mean, look at this last game. They knew every time it was a screen.
They really did.
And that's another thing. Like when you're setting up a screen, you really want to make it believable. I thought the effort on the screen game was a little lackluster. Like it was like, dude, these guys are really, really good. So if you just stand there and pretend to be stupid for a minute, they'll just run right by you and think they beat you. But you have to make it so obvious that they beat you. No, they're instantly like, no, that doesn't happen. That's not normal. Where's the screen?
You
it
can
bothered
see it. Yep.
me. Yeah, you're like, dude, come on, man.